Hey YouTube, welcome back to the Obi Thorn Alliance. What are we doing today, Jacob?
Since we did the Marvel ranking, we're doing a ranking for the DC movies.
So if you want to find out what ranking we gave the selected DC movies, stick around. So I mentioned the word selected because there is lots of different movies that fall into the DC category. So we've gone with kind of their new age kind of cinematic universe they're trying to create. So we've kind of picked, team up movies where characters cross over, and we've narrowed it down to 11. One of the special conditions we put in there was the Justice League. So we do know there's two versions, so we've decided that Justice League will be in the list, but you can choose which one. So, if Snyder Cut's your favourite, then that's going to make the list, where if you prefer the original version that was released, then if that fits higher, that's the one that takes the list. So we've gone with that way. So instead of putting the two in there, it's just less confusing. In terms of Batmans, we've gone with kind of the ones that are in the team-up movies. So the Batman with Robert Pattinson doesn't make the list, and we're not going to include the previous ones that, the Christian Bale, or even the ones before that, the George Clooney ones, and the Joker movie. Even though it's amazing, we're not going to include it because it doesn't really cross over with the others. We try to stick with what this new kind of cinematic universe they've made. So if you think that's wrong, leave us a comment, see how you would do it. But that's how we've decided to do it. What did you put at number 11?
My number 11 is Birds of Prey. I just found this movie really boring. It wasn't for Margot Robbie and Ewan McGregor as the Black Mask. This is just really dreadful movie. I haven't really got much positive to say about it. The best thing about this movie was the villain, and then they killed him off in a way that I still don't understand, with him getting killed off with the grenade. Even though they were really strong men, the females just defeated them really easily. It's basically a movie for female empowerment, and I'm fine with that, but the females were just so unlikable, and I think if DC had faith with the other characters, they would have made another movie with them, or at least a origin project. Overall, just not a good movie.
So I've gone with number Suicide Squad. So this is the first release of the Suicide Squad, the one that featured Will Smith. I just found this movie very boring. In the cinemas, it put me to sleep. When I watched it again at home, I felt very similar. Had potential, it had some cool characters. It just wasn't couldn't get the mix right of seriousness or whether it was funny. There was some standout performances in it, but overall the villain was horrible. I didn't really like what they went with that. I do like the premise of the Suicide Squad, but I just don't think it was a good movie. I'm not going to go too in detail with it. It's number 11 for a reason.
My number 10, Suicide Squad as well. Kind of the same reason as Luke. I liked it when it was really popular, but now that the newest Suicide Squads came out, the charm, I think, with Peacemaker and the newer one, it just does it a lot better. If Will Smith was in this movie, it would just fail quite miserably. The whole villain thing was an epic fail. It was a lot darker. I think the newer one did it better because it went for the darkness, but it was also a comedy as well. So James Gunn brought the charm, and I think that's what made it better than the first one. I don't even remember it that much, except for how Harley Quinn dressed up.
Risque.
Yes, and, it didn't really work for this movie, and she didn't do none of that in the second one, and it was just a better movie, so that's why it's at number 10.
So at number 10, Birds of Prey. So kind of reverse those two with Jacob. Birds of Prey, I like the concept. I was interested in it. I just found that the powers of the characters they brought in there was a bit silly.
Didn't make sense.
Yeah, there was a girl that could, use her voice and, defeat people with sound. The fight scenes were a bit lackluster, but I thought Harley Quinn and Margot Robbie playing Harley Quinn was really great. It was an entertaining movie. I just think it was a bit silly, and that's why it's at the bottom for me. It just wasn't very serious. I did like it, glad it came out. It's just, not serious enough for me to move higher up the rankings. So it purely gets number 10 for that reason.
Number 9, and this pains me to say because the first one is one of the best movies, Wonder Woman 1984. I don't know what happened to the sequel. Has so many plot holes with how somehow they got a plane at a stage memorial petrol and they were able to fly. Just the plot in general, how Steve Turner was able to still be in a movie but in another man's body, but she was able to save him, and how wishes granted drove people insane. I don't know what happened to this movie. Just really, out of all the movies, this one hurts the most because the first one was so epic, and then the second one is the most disappointing and very much an epic fail.
But number 9, I've got the same, for pretty much the same reasons. I really liked the first movie. I looked forward to this second one. I think it had a good premise. I think the start was quite solid. You know, in the 1980s, you know, it was very cool and funky. They had a lot of good things going on, but the premises of the wishes and bringing back someone from the dead, they weren't really, you know, it was just silly. They wanted to really find a way to bring the cheetah into it, so then Wonder Woman had her like kind of arch enemy, but it just didn't work for me, which sucks because it had a lot of potential. The fish out of water thing, because Wonder Woman had lived through all that time and like she knew what was going on, but it had a lot of potential being a funky movie in the 80s, and they kind of ruined it with a pretty boring storyline that had lots and lots of plot holes.
So coming in at number 8 is Batman v Superman. It definitely had good moments, but unfortunately the whole Superman becoming evil and Lex Luthor trying to, his whole plot, it just seemed too complicated for its own good. After coming in from when Man of Steel happened, it just had so much going for it. It was basically the beginning, basically Avengers Assemble versions of the whole DCU, but it's like second movie of its trilogy. Being introduced to Wonder Woman and then seeing Aquaman, so many different characters, and it just fell apart. Didn't leave much to be desired. It wasn't really a good movie.
So I've at number 8 got Suicide Squad. So the one that features John Cena in it. It was funny, you know, was entertaining, but the movie itself, you know, the premise, the storyline, it lacked for me. The best thing to come out of it was the characters, and from that we got a spin-off show, which is one of the best shows of the year. So it falls at 8 for me, just because it's an odd thing to redo another movie, but not really explain whether they're doing the same thing a second time or the first one didn't exist. It's too much left to the imagination for me.
Number 7 with Black Adam, and for me, the action is the thing that holds it up, but for me, the story kind of lets it down. And yes, it's a really good action film, but when you compare it to other superhero films, it's not really anything special. And Black Adam as a character, I don't know, is that interesting? Movie in general, I don't think it really needed the Crown storyline. I don't think the villain really needed to be there. That really wasted the whole storyline potential, but I am looking forward to seeing Black Adam take on Superman. At least we get that, but overall it's kind of it's okay movie.
At number 7, I've got the same as Black Adam. I think the hype really ruined it for me. It was talked up so much that then it could never live up to it. I admit it was probably I thought it was going to be really bad, and it wasn't really bad, but there was a lot of iffy things about it. I think the villain was not needed at all. I think if we skip that out of the movie, it definitely makes it a whole lot better. So I think it loses marks and gets that ranking for me for trying to do too much, where if they kept it simple, I think it would have been a lot better movie.
Number 6 for me is the Suicide Squad. I definitely really enjoyed the banter between Deadshot, Peacemaker. But the whole teaming up and getting new villains, like what Luke said, they did do that in the first movie, but this movie came across better because of James Gunn's direction, but we've already seen it in the Suicide Squad. It's kind of the copy of Guardians of the Galaxy, but for DC. But really enjoyable movie. If it wasn't for this movie, we wouldn't have got Peacemaker. So overall, really good.
So at number 6, Justice League Snyder Cut. So this movie, it's hard to like it too much because we've already seen it, and then we've seen it change. So it's hard to forget what you've already seen. So it wasn't new. I think if it came out and that was the only version, I would have liked it a lot more. But it kind of feels funny re-watching it and trying to ignore what we'd already seen. You know, it was a very, very long movie, and it added in a couple of origin stories to Cyborg, The Flash. You know, to me, it was just very long. It felt, didn't feel right knowing that you've already seen what you've done, what they've made, and kind of get a second chance at it. So I think if it came out as the original, it would have been a different story. So mainly because of its length, it loses points for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. Number 5 is the same. Justice League Snyder's Cut. It's definitely better than the original, but I think they just should have waited for Snyder's Cut, because the reason why they changed directors is because Snyder had personal problems within his own personal life, so they gave it to Joss Whedon. But overall, Cyborg a lot better, and The Flash, but we kind of already seen the movie already, so it's kind of hard to put this movie in the top 4 when it had 2 cracks at doing the same thing. We did get Darkseid, or what is quite a menacing villain, so that was very interesting to see, and hope we get to see him moving forward.
So number 5, I've got Batman v Superman. I actually really liked this movie. I had low expectations because I didn't really understand the premise of why Batman would be versing Superman and how it would even be a challenge, but I was proven otherwise. You know, it had some cameos in it too. Yeah, it's an interesting movie. It got me thinking about this idea of, of heroes, someone as powerful as Superman, if we don't have some kind of like silver bullet to protect us from him, what stops him from going crazy and, taking over our planet? So it was a good thinking movie in that, and it's very similar to like The Boys and the premise of what they're trying to do in The Boys. So I like that. It got let down by one particular scene where they kind of had the apocalypse scene. I think that was really weird and strange, where they're in the desert and kind of like an apocalyptic future. That was probably the worst part of the movie. You take that out and, it was pretty overall good. I was happy with it. Yes, I liked the whole memes and funny part about how they both became friends over having mother with the same name and, and being Martha. But, I thought that was fine. I thought it was an entertaining enough movie. So it's number 5 for me.
Number 4 for me is the first Wonder Woman. This movie is amazing origin story, does female character amazingly. She's very stubborn, but she just wants to do best for others, and this would hands down have to be one of the best World War One movies, and it isn't even a World War One movie. It's amazing superhero story, ahead of its time for the female origin story. A lot better than Captain Marvel. Did it better than Miss Marvel and She-Hulk and all these new female superhero things. But unfortunately, the reason why it doesn't make the top 3 is because of its sequel. But the first movie did an amazing job. Besides the final act with the CGI final boss fight, didn't enjoy that, but besides that, amazing movie.
I've gone with Man of Steel, so starting to get to the pointy end of the list, and we're starting to hit some origin stories. So Man of Steel was a really good origin story for Superman. I didn't really have much knowledge of... I haven't seen any of the previous Superman movies or shows besides this. I did see Smallville, actually, I lie. But this was quite enjoyable. I liked the premise. It had it was a big Hollywood blockbuster. Henry Cavill, big star. I just think it was really good. I think they did did it well. The villain made a lot of sense. They didn't overdo it, and then he's kind of, I just think it did really well to explain the whole how Superman came to be Superman. So it's a great origin story.
My number 3 is Man of Steel, getting into the top 3. Even though I find it hard to rate to Superman, I really enjoy Henry Cavill as Superman, the whole Lois Lane and different storylines, and this is the movie that set up the whole DC storyline, and it's probably the best way it could have gone, and unfortunately they didn't continue the strong trend, but this movie was an amazing start.
So at number 3 I've got Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was very, very cool. I liked the idea of how they, she came to help them fight in the war and the reason why and how she got involved. The only thing for me that let it down was I think they missed a beat with the villain. I think I would have liked it instead of the villain actually being, the person had been kind of possessed as such by this god, that in fact that she realised that that wasn't the case, that, that evil is actually within people. And, it doesn't matter. You can't just take out one person and evil goes away. Evil will always exist. And I think that would have been a more meaningful message if she realised that the person starting the World War wasn't possessed by an evil spirit. He was just evil, and more evil people will continue to come about. I think I would have liked that message more than... And I really felt that's the way it was going. So, if they changed that, I think it would have been a near perfect movie. So, very, very cool. So, number 3, Wonder Woman.
Number 2 for me is Shazam. Whole storyline of being orphan is a trend within the DC movies, but they do it so well. Getting powers and becoming a family and accepting and love is a great message with this movie. Through the montage of learning the powers, I just really enjoyed the first Shazam movie. Really enjoyed going to the cinemas. I felt like it was an amazing origin story for a character that I didn't know about. And really looking forward to the second one. I have high expectations when Shazam and Black Adam eventually see each other.
So number 2, I've also got Shazam, very much for the same reasons. Shazam was a movie I didn't know anything about Shazam prior to it. I had actually really low expectations, and I came out very entertained after seeing this movie. I laughed, I was excited, I had good action. I liked the idea of seeing a hero kind of get their powers and then have to understand them. It has that kind of Spider-Man vibe to it. Spidey wasn't just born with powers and came to understand it. He was just, an average person that, happened to get powers stowed upon them and then had to learn how to use them. So I think it's really cool. Very playful as a movie. Not too many issues with it. The whole idea of how Shazam gets its powers is a bit, iffy for me, and, that ties in with Black Adam. But the fact he has them and what he can do with them is very cool. So Shazam at number 2, and I'm guessing they're going to have the same for number 1. So what is it?
Number 1 for me is Aquaman, played by Jason Momoa. Really enjoyed the first Aquaman with how it dealt with the sea world. Not a lot of superhero movies actually deal with that, and we got to see Jason Momoa also in other movies, but he did an amazing job, and really looking forward to the second Aquaman. It even set up a villain that is going to be going through his whole story arc. In most superhero movies, they kill off the first villain in the first movie, and then they have a second villain for the second movie, but in Aquaman, he has his one villain going through, because we know what happens. His father gets killed, the main villain, and now that's the villain's motives for hating Aquaman. And I just really enjoyed that aspect. Really enjoyed the moral message of us not caring about the ocean and global warming. Yeah, haven't much more to say. It's just an amazing movie.
I think Aquaman's a near perfect movie for me. Good length, very entertaining, star cast, good villain, and it was multi-layered, as you said. It involves real-world things in terms of global warming. So, that gives a lot of context to what's going on to the story, which makes it feel real. The way that he gets his powers, makes a lot of sense. the politics underneath the ocean, you know, that adds up as well. There's just a lot of things about it that you go, you know what, they got that right. It's a good storyline. Again, Aquaman was a hero that I didn't know much about before, and you know, I'm used to seeing the comic book version of him, and this is a bit different. But I really liked how this movie worked, and also had kind of multiple villains and multiple stories. So you got him, using his powers, and does he want to use them for good or bad? Does he want to get involved with politics? You know, is he going to be the king of the ocean? Is he going to get Poseidon walk thing? Is he going to, how's he going to get that? There's just several layers that happen within this movie, and it's just, entertaining the whole way through. And I really like what's to come of it. And, Aquaman, it's cool. It's been on the land, it was under the water. There's not much to dislike about this movie. I find it hard to find any flaws, really.
Well, thank you for watching. Comment down below what your list is. We'd be really curious to know. As always, there's videos at the end. Like and subscribe. Let the force be with you. As always, you are awesome. See you next time.